Hello and welcome. This is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to the live chat application. In this week's training, I'm going to show you how to put this amazing live chat into any application so that your users, your followers can chat with you, and you can manage all of your chats from a brand new live chat manager. It's going to be an incredible training. I can't wait. Let's get started. All right, thanks so much for joining me. I've got a really fantastic training. Nothing is more important these days than chat. Being able to communicate with your customers, with your users, or with the people that you work with is really important. And there's no better application to put chat in than Excel. And that's just what we've done this week. We put in a brand new chat. And that means any type of application. A few weeks ago, we designed this contact manager. I just added this live chat in it. You can now chat with the admin, with anybody else you want, as long as they have that chat manager application. You can put in your messages here saying thanks so much, and it's going to automatically come to the manager or to whoever you have, as long as they have the chat manager application. It's going to be a great training. It's going to automatically come to here. Any brand new messages are automatically going to come to here. See how that happens. Really great. And you could be anywhere in the world. So I really hope you enjoy this training. Make sure you follow it till the end. There are so many nuggets, so much to learn. Don't just download the application, which of course is free, using the links down below, using either your email or Facebook. I'll get that to you. But I urge you to watch the training. Just having the application is not enough. Knowing how to use it, how to customize it, how to fix any issues, or how to make it your own is the best thing to do. And the only way to do that is to follow these entire trainings, because I do them for you free each and every Tuesday. If you like them, all I ask for you to do is subscribe and click on the notification icon bell. That'll ensure that you get your trainings each and every week and get notified of that. And of course, I do these free each and every week. If you appreciate that and want to support us, a great way to do that is to pick up the 175 application zip file. That is 175 of my best applications for just $66 right now. That's less than 37 cents per template, and they're all yours. You can download them in a single zip file. It's going to include an actual library, so you can single click to open up an application or single click to open up the accompanying video on YouTube. So you get the application and the training. It's a great deal, $66. Lots of people are picking it up. I hope you do too. All right, let's get started. We've got a lot to cover this week. So basically everything's going to merge around this live chat manager. So you'll have multiple chats here. If you're chatting with multiple people with your applications, you can select on them. It's going to load the chat. I only have one right now. And of course, we're going to work with two applications. This time I've got a contact manager. Keep in mind, this application we did a few weeks back, so we're not going to be focused on this. I'm just going to be focused on the live chat. If you want this contact manager, check a few weeks YouTube video. You'll find the contact manager there. This live chat is what I'm going to be doing. When we send a message or receive a message, it's going to automatically receive inside this from anywhere you want. And I've designed this little form here, and you put the username here and you send the message, and it's going to be automatically sent. And so when we enter a message here and then we go ahead and send it, it's going to be sent to that, and then we can close this chat in order to get to our other application, and then it's going to be sent in here. We'll check for messages. Now the messages will appear automatically here, and if we have this application open, so it's going to appear just like that, including the time and who sent it and everything. And if you want to respond, that'll work too. So we can do thank you, and it's going to automatically respond inside that. Okay, so how do we do that? How do we make this happen? Well, I want to go into that. There's two parts, two components, of course. There is the components inside here where you can put this. So basically this is a single module and a user form. So let's get into that and show you some of the details of this. And then we're going to go into the manager, the application, which is the chat manager, and show you how we did everything we're going to work with. This is going to be a really great training because there's a central database where all these chats are located. That's going to be online. We're going to be using a brand new database. It's going to be used called Integromat, and this is called a chat data. All of our data is going to be stored in here. So that data that I just sent, I'm going to refresh that. Notice it's all here right in this database. That's online. That means your data can go anywhere in the world. This is a really, really amazing application. I'm going to include the links down below. Integromat. We're doing all sorts of automation. This is the first week that we're actually using it as a database. So let's just go ahead and briefly take a look inside that. If you have Integromat, it's free. There's a paid version, but this one's free, and you can use lots of free. You have lots of scenarios that you can create and automations. We've gone through it in a few weeks, but you can create different kinds of automations and scenarios, and you can also create a database too. So we're going to be doing all that. We're going to be creating a data store. It's called Data Store. That's where our chat's going to be stored. Now I have two different accounts on here. I've got this one. This is my Excel for Freelancers account. There's nothing on here. And then I have another account that we're going to be working with this. Here's the data. So two different accounts because I want to be able to show you exactly what. How do we create a data store? That's the first thing I want to do. If we're going to be storing chat data, we need to store it somewhere. So how do we do that? Well, we click on the Add Data. Remember, you're going to go to Integromat here. What you're going to do is you're going to sign up for the free account. It'll just be free. You put in your name, your email. Once you're signed up and confirmed, you'll get this screen, a screen that looks just like this. And you click on the data stores. We're going to create a little bit of a database. So we'll click on Add Data Store and say My Data Store. And you'll actually have to create a data structure because you can create multiple databases with this. So let's go ahead and do that. We don't have any of them, so let's just click on Add, and we'll just call it Test. Let's try that again. Let's click. It's kind of sensitive on here. Add, okay, and then we'll just call this Test Data Test Chat. And once we can add items inside this, which is really what we want to do. And what do we want? We want to give it a name. Let's just call it, we can give it any name, just call it, let's say send time. And then we can say, well, what type of it is. In this case, it could be a date, a number. We can go with number in this because times are numbers as well, but we could also go with time. And then we'll click add, and that's going to add it. Now keep in mind, you can have a type and you can have a label too. If we edit this item, we can also set a label here showing the advanced. We can also put a label once we click on the advanced, and this also will show a label. I just put the same thing in so we can have the same, and that's going to save it. So now we have a name and a label. When we click add item, we can add another item. So we can have send from, and this could be a text just like we would in Excel, and it's a really nice database. So send from, okay, and then we can say text, and we can set a default value, whether it's required or whether it's multi-line. Really kind of helpful things. Again, showing advanced, and then send from. So when you're complete with this, you're going to have a nice little database that you can use. We'll drag this up here and then click OK, and then click add. Okay, so now add, and then we'll just save that, and then we have it saved. So now when we have our little data store here, we can give it a different name. We can give it any kind of name, test data, so we can give it any kind of a name there. And then when we browse it, we can see the records here. There's no records in here. If we wanted to add a record manually, we could give it a key would be automatic. And then what we can do, let's take a look in here. So once you have your test data, then you're going to have something that looks just like this inside our database. Let's go back into the one that I've completed here, and we have a test data here. Notice we have something called chat data. We have a key, we have a sent on, we have a user. If I go ahead and edit this, let's go ahead and click on, let's close that out, and we'll go ahead and open it up again through the refreshing here. Notice we have database. This is where my data are stored. Your data are stored here. We have chat data here. So if we browse on that, we can see the browse that we can see. We can't edit it from here, just browsing it from here. But of course we can edit it from here. If we click on the edit, again, it shows our chat data structure. If I click on here, editing it, it's going to show all the different types we have. We can move them up or down using these arrows. We can edit them using here. We can change the type. So we have really a kind of a basic database here, and it's going to be really helpful. It's going to store all of our data. We can set a size. So if we view it, if we browse it, of course, we can also select records. If I want to delete a specific record, I can delete it here. It's going to say really, but I don't want to delete it. So this is where our data is going to be stored. We have a key that's automated. We have a sent on, and notice that it's just the decimals. That's what I want. This is a time. 44189 is a date and time, just like it is in Excel. 44189.536, that's a time. We've got a user ID. I've got a sent from and who we're sending it to, the status, and of course I have the message. So that's going to be stored inside there. So that's really what I want there. And so next up, what I want to do is I want to be able to bring that into both applications, right? But I want to bring that, so the idea is inside our chat data, I want to bring that information, I want to bring it into what's called a chat log. So I'm going to take all that data, I'm going to bring it right in here, I'm going to assign a row, but everything else is the same. Keep in mind that the time is based on the UTC time. What if your chats are in different time zones? We need a central time zone. So the idea is that everything goes in the database at the central UTC or GMT time zone, which is the same. Then once it gets extracted out, it's still kept in the UTC time zone, but once I bring it inside my chat, I'm going to then update it to the local time zone. That way, it'll show 7:51 p.m. here, but maybe if your person you're chatting with is on a different time zone, it'll show on their time zone. So it's really cool and really accurate. It can show multiple time zones. So we've got that here. So basically the idea is we're going to have our chat log here. And then as far as the admin's concerned, what we want to do is I want to show all the individual chats, all the individual people down here, the chats down here. So in order to do that, we might have different sent from. We have some from Lisa, some Fred. Fred, of course, is our admin. So we want to be able to extract that data and bring it into this live chat. So what do? We're going to set an admin name. Here's our admin name. That's going to set the admin. So we want to send something. We know it's going to be sent from Fred. And that way, we're going to send it to who? We're going to send it to Lisa. We have a list of users we can send to. I just have a simple user log and a user ID. User IDs are really going to be handy because we need to know if the end user decides to, let's say, have a different username, we want to make sure. So let's say you're creating Excel applications and you got your Excel application here. Inside some of the hidden, what you'll do is you'll have a user ID. The user won't see that, but that's automated. It could be a license number, it could be user ID, anything unique for that user. Okay, so when they go ahead and send that message and they send it, not only their username is going to be recorded, whatever the name they put in here, but their user ID as well. That user ID is unique to them, and that way you can differentiate. That way if they use different names at times, you can always send it back. So we have that. So what else do we want? What else do I want to track? I want to track the last data was checked. Remember, these are date and times. When you see this 441859, I like it in that format, but if I change it to a date and time format, let's go into number formats. We change it to actually a date and time, both of them, we're going to see that that's it. Something like this here, you're going to see that that's basically 1:17. This is UTC time, by the way. And then we're going to be able to translate that to regular time. I'll show you how to do that. So basically, I want to know the last time we checked, right? Because when I bring in, again, each user is going to have a user log. When I bring in new data for that user, this will be hidden. I only want to bring in the new data. So I need to know what is the last time we checked it. I only want to bring in information and logs and chats that are going to be after the last time. I don't want to bring in the new old data again and again and again, only the new stuff. So we need to keep track of when the last time we checked it. I also want to know the username. That's going to be based on a user form. The admin username, that's going to be helpful. And the difference between the UTC. I'm going to show you how to calculate that. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean the difference between this time and the UTC. Right now, currently, I'm at UTC +7, right? So there's 7 hours I'm ahead of UTC in my time zone. I'm going to show you how to do that automatically. So you get the idea. So now we're going to create a little bit of a user form. And so basically this user form is very, very simple. We just have the message. We have the message summary here. We have the message, a button, close chat, and a send. Now, if you want to learn how to design really cool forms like this, I'm going to be doing that in my mentorship program. We're doing lots of forms. So if you like that and you want to be able to learn how to build an entire accounting application and of course learn how to sell your applications, my mentorship program is a great way to do that. If you want to join up, myexcelmentor.com will give you all the details. I have hundreds of students joining, learning, and getting paid for their Excel skills when they create and sell their own applications. So I hope you join us for that. All right, so basically, let's go into the user form. I'm going to go into the components of this. We're going to go into the VBA right now. So we're going to go inside the developers. If you don't have the developers, click on the Visual Basic here, and then you can find it. If it's not there, of course, you can just find the developers tab under the file and the options, and then you could locate it right here into the customize and then just select the developers. Alt F11 will also get you there. That's a shortcut. So I've got a chat form here and I've got something called live chat macros. Now when you get this application, you're not going to get the contact manager, right? Because that's not necessary. But what I will do is I'm going to give you this live chat application, and you see these live chat macros. I'm going to put all of these inside this. I'm going to do it right now for you. So I'm going to copy all these macros. These are all the macros you need to associate. And I'm going to put them right inside here. It's called user chat macros. I'm going to put them right in there. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to take this chat form, I'm going to drag it down. So now you have everything in this one workbook. Keep in mind, user chats, these are the macros. These are all the macros that are going to be used inside your user application. That's the application that you want to be sending to a user. So that's the one you want there. And next up, what we want to do is you want to use this particular chat form, this form right here inside your application, so that when user clicks a button, it'll launch this, okay, this application. So you're going to have a single application which you're going to download. You'll have the admin macros. These are the macros that are associated with the admin, okay? These are the macros that are all associated with this portion right in here. All this live chat macros, selection, finish the chats, and send, and everything like that you're going to be able to do. So on that case, you'll have that in two different modules, but you'll have everything you need in one application. All you need to do is take this, drag it into your application, and also take this module, drag it into, and then make some updates, right? Your application might be different, right? Notice, keep in mind, my application has this information in yellow. This is all for our user chat. You can put that information anywhere you want in your application as long as it's hidden. Okay, great. So let's get into it. Let's take a look at some of the user. That's more of a simple one. The user, let's take a look at that on this form here. So let's take a look at this form here. Basically, this form, if we take a look at it, we've got a basic form here that I've designed here. Given it a background, this one's called Chat Summary, and I've given it a name, a text box. Keep in mind that there's some settings here that you want to know about. We have, in this case, we have visible equals true. Obviously, word wrap equals true. We want to wrap those words. That's very important. And we also want multi-line. Multi-line is true, so that's important for something like this. Same for this one here. We also want to make multi-line, and this one's called chat message. So keep in mind the chat message. This button I've created called close button. This button, which is actually a picture, called send button. So that's it for that, basically it. And then we have an enter name here, username. This one's called username. And then I just have a label here. So that's just really it for the three fields here that we have and the two buttons. So it's a relatively simple form. We're not going to go into details on how to create these forms because we've been over it before, and I go over that a lot in other things, but this one I really want to focus on this. So the only important things that you need to understand: the name of the form is called chat form, and the fields associated: chat summary, chat message, and then all the way down here, username on this one, and then the buttons. All right, so what about the code that goes beyond? There's just a little bit of code behind it. So when we click on view code, all that's here is when we click that close button, we're going to run a macro called chat hide. When we click on the send button, we're going to run a macro called chat send message. Nothing on user form click, so we can get rid of that. And then also when we initialize, I mean when that form launches, what I want to do is I want to see if A9 is empty. What does I mean by A9? What I want to know is if there's a current user. It's nice to save the user, right? So we know what user for last time. A9 is where our username, but if this is blank, that means the user has not ever entered their username. In that case, what I want to do is put the focus on this particular file. If it is, I just want to put their name here. So that's kind of a nice feature, so they don't need to put their username in. All they can do is just get ready to chat. Okay, so what I did in that case is I made sure that we have, let's go out of here and go back in here. If it's empty, right, then we want to set the focus to the username field. Otherwise, set the focus to the message, right? So basically, we're prompting them to enter the username if there isn't one. That's it for the code here. So it's very, very simple on that. So let's get into some of the macros on the user. Remember, it's called live chat macros. Import macros, contact, these are all have to do with the application, right? That's nothing we're going to focus on today. These have all been covered in a prior training. I'm only using this application as a sample. You can put this chat on any single application you want. So it's great. All right, so let's focus on what we need to do. Again, we're going to be using Integromat to help send that information, right? We need to send that information. So the idea is here, sending the information to, we can close this test data. We don't need this anymore. And we can focus on our database here, right here, our chat data. So what I want to do is I want to send information into this database and I want to pull it from the database. So we're going to use three different types of scenarios. What's a scenario? A scenario allows us for automation. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to take a webhook, something like this, and we're going to use three different ones. I'm going to use one from the user to check and receive data. So I want to send information. I want to see if there's any new data, and then I want to extract that data out. Another one I want to do is I want to send a message. And another one, let's go back to that into the scenarios. We're going to go into that. And another one is I want the admin. So here's the admin check and receive. So admin have different than user. So I actually have 3 of them here. So we have database, we have user check. So here it is. Let's go ahead and close out of that. I'm going to move ahead. So basically what we want to do is we want to, and I'll walk you through this, send some information from Excel using a webhook, put it into the database, and then get some information out and bring it back into Excel. So everything's going to central around this database right here. This is the one that we're going to focus on here. And so the first thing what I want to do is just simply send a message. So if we look in our scenarios here, let's go back and go open that scenarios. So I've got other ones, but the one I'm going to focus on right now is send a message. Okay, so the simplest thing is just sending a message. Okay, so if we click here, remember, if you want to click a new scenario, this is not a training on scenarios per se because that's involved, but there's lots of help. So scenarios, basically when you want to create a new scenario, just click create new scenario. And then what we're going to be doing is just going into webhooks, right? Clicking on webhooks, that's the first thing. Webhooks allows us to Excel to communicate. So clicking on webhooks, they continue. And then also what I want to do is I want to add another module, something called data stored. Okay, what I'm going to do is adding data store. So that's what I want to be adding, data store. Now what do we want to do? We want to add and replace a record. So I'm going to click add or replace a record. So we have a few things now. Let's start with the beginning. Let's delete that module and I'm going to start with the webhook. So what I want to do is I want to create a custom webhook. Now what I want to do is I want to get some information from Excel. So we're going to create a webhook. This is the way we do it. We just click on add any name we want here, click save, and what that's going to do is create a webhook. It's going to look like this. I'm going to copy that and bring it into Excel. That's going to allow Excel to send information here, and I'll walk you through that webhook. Then the next step, what we want to do is we want to add that information into our data store, and here's where we want to add a record. This we don't need. Choose a module. Okay, so we don't need this. So now what we want to do is we have a chat data. So now what we want to do is I want to send all that information. I want to send the user ID. I want to send everything in from that webhook. So what do I want to send? Well, when I run a check, what I want to send is a few things. I want to send the user name. I want to send the message that they're sending. I want to send the time, and I want to send it who they're sending it to. Obviously, in this case, they're going to send it to the admin. So you always put your admin name here somewhere so we know who we're going to send it to. So that's all the information I want to send into the database. And I want to also put it in the status. So how do we do that? Well, let's take a look at the completed one that I have. Now that we kind of have a little bit of an understanding, I know I'm moving fast a little bit, but let's take a look here into this one. This is not the one I want. Let's go back into the scenarios here. That was just a test data. We can leave that, but I'm going to focus on the send message. This is the one that's completed. Now, so the idea is we want to send all this information through a macro. So let's walk into the macro step by step. And then as soon as we get into this part, I'm going to show you how to do it step by step, so you won't miss a step. Okay, so the first thing what I want to do is that macro called send macro. So live chat, and we're going to focus on send message. Send message. The first thing we want to do is make sure that they're actually sending a message. Remember, we have a form called chat form. Remember, the field we have is called chat message. That's the message that they're going to be sending. If that value equals empty, then please enter a message to send. What would that mean? That means if they try to click on here and they click send message, this is blank, right? We have to actually have a message to send. So we want to give that, please enter a message to send. If that's blank, just let them know. So next up, I want to set the user ID. Now we know the user ID is already based on here. We have the user ID in the application based here on A5. So since we have that already, we know that it's going to be in A5. So the user ID is located right there in A5. So we can set the user ID. I also want to send the user ID. Remember, they can use different names, but a user ID will never change. Okay, I want to know the send on. Whose send from is going to be equal to sheet 1A9. That's where we're going to send it from. That's the name of it. When they enter that information in the form, it's going to be right here into A9. That's the name of the person we're sending it from. Now we also want to know sending it to. That's going to be the admin. That's going to be located in A11. So we have send from and send to and the user ID. I want to send all of this information into our database in Integromat through one of the automations there. Then also, of course, we need the message, but just in case, I want to remove the commas. If they've entered any commas, I'm going to temporarily remove them. And the reason that I want to remove them is because that commas can create issues when we're using multiple records, and I use it as a delimiter when we're bringing it back into, so we want to make sure to remove it. So just temporarily remove it, but we're only removing it for the portion that's going to be sent. In our database, it's going to be saved in this portion of the chat log. It'll be saved here, so we can have commas here, and the commas will be back in there, just as far as sending them, because that's going to be helpful for us and creates issues. Okay, so what I want to do is use the replace function, and I want to take the chat form, chat message, and the value, that's the message they're sending. If a comma is found, I'm going to replace it with nothing. So we're going to use the replace feature. If the comma is found, replace it with nothing. Now we're going to use a really cool feature called UTC. What I want to do is I want to determine what the UTC of the current time is. That means if the current time here, if it's 7 p.m. now, the UTC time is 12 p.m. because we're exactly 7 hours ahead of it. But I want that UTC time because I want a uniform time regardless of the time zone. So that way in the database it's always accurate. We can sort based on the actual date regardless of time zone. So the first thing we want to do is get that UTC time zone. So we can use that, create set UTC. I've set that here, UTC all the way up here as an object, and UTC is an object up here. So once we have that, we're going to get the WebM, I don't know what this means to be honest with you, WM scripting SW, find date and time. Okay, so basically we're going to use that object, just copy and paste it like I do. I don't know exactly, I should look it up if I'm teaching it, sorry. You can look it up and tell me. UTC, we're going to set the variable date to now. So basically what I want to do is I want to extract the UTC date from the current date and time. What I'm going to do is then assign that to a variable called sent_on. That's the UTC get variable dates false, right? That there is going to put our star. So this time, if it's 7 o'clock, it's now going to be 12 p.m., right? 7 hours before that UTC time, because that's the one I want to send. I want to send the UTC time. I also want to know the difference. It's really important that I understand the difference between the current time and the UTC time. I know it's 7, but what I want to do is I want to put that difference. I want to put the difference in a cell, and I'm going to put it in A13. Why is that difference important? Because when I bring the times back inside our chat log, let's say this is 1:07 p.m., right? That's not accurate. I need to add 7 to that to make it an accurate time. I need to make it 8:07 p.m. So when they pull that log up, it shows the right time, right? So when they pull that log up, I want it to show 8:07 p.m. because that's the actual time. So I need to know what time to add to that. If I know the difference between the UTC and the current local time, all I need to do is add 7 to 1:07 and I'm going to get the right time. So that's a great little trick. So all I need to do is save this inside. So when I bring in the data back into that chat log, I've got the difference right here and I can just apply that difference there. So that's why we want to put that difference in. I want to put it in right there in A13. So we do that with this line of code right here. Sheet 1, A13 equals now the current date minus the send_on. That's going to get us the difference. If it's a negative, it's fine too. It can be below UTC, right? You can be 7 before UTC and it would be a negative number. Negative numbers are just fine. There's no problem. We can be before or after UTC. All right, next up, now I'm ready. I want to send, and I've got all the variables. I got the user ID, the send from, the send to, the message. I've got everything I need. I'm going to send it to Integromat. I want to put it in the database. So what we're going to do is we're going to set object OTTP create object ms xml2.server xml http. Okay, we're going to send that information. Then what I want to do is I want to create a link. I want to know what to send it to. This is going to help set it up. Now what are we going to send? Well, we're going to send it here. We created that web hook. Remember that web hook, that hook that we created? And I told you exactly we need to create a webhook. That's this one right in here. If we clicked on webhook, we see this webhook. This is the webhook we're going to be copying and pasting inside thing. That allows us to send information here, so we can send it to the database. That's the same webhook that we copied and pasted here. Make sure after it's a question mark. Next, after that comes all of our variables and all of our details, right? So we have labels sent on, and then we have the actual variable, the actual data sent on here. Then again, using the and sign as a separator, the user ID as a label, this label, and then equals user ID. So we're going to do that for every single field, including the send from, the send to, and the message. So everything's going to be sent. Then once we get it, we do an object post URL. We're going to do events to make sure that we don't slow up everything. The object request header content type, we're going to send that information using this one. This one line right here will send it to Integromat. And then what it's going to do is going to get us a response. So how does that work? So if we click on here and we see that we have some information here and we've got already in, and now when we click on here, we see we get information. So when we bring it in, it's going to get us this information. It's going to get us all this kind of information. If I run this once, and it's going to wait for me to send it something. So let's go ahead and send it something and give it some information. And we'll just say big issue, send it to that. And then what we'll do is we'll click send, and now it's going to receive it. So now if we go back into here, it's going to show that it's received. So what was received? Well, let's take a quick look. If we look in here, this is going to be our data information. If we look in here, it's going to be everything here. So we have input bundles. What's our input? We have unread, information, Fred, and Lisa. What is our output? What's our output here? Our output bundles is everything, our keys. So we have everything here inside there. And so we take a look at that and how do we load that information in? So here what we do is if all of the information got sent in our webbook, everything got sent inside here. So how do we know what got sent? We click on here and we see all the available fields. I click on any field, we have all the information here sent on here. User ID here, Lisa, Fred, and then we have the message, big issue. So all we need to do is map these fields with the database, right? We've selected our data. I've had the data. All we do is select which database we want. If there's a key, we can put it in here. We set in this record sent on. Our key is going to be automatic, so we don't need to assign it. It says you can assign a unique key that can be used later to receive it. If you leave this field blank, a key will be generated. It's fine. A unique key is automatically generated for us. Okay, so we're going to match the send on. All we need to do, again, is just click on here once, and it's going to add it in there, but we already have it in there, so we don't need it. And the same thing. So each one, we just kind of map each one. This is going to map it to the database. Status, I don't need a mapping. I'm going to make it unread automatically. So I'm going to type in there, I'm going to make that static. So we always have the status as unread when it goes in there. And then the message. That's all we need to do to get the information into the database. Very, very simple. Okay, so let's continue on with macro. So basically it comes to the webbook and it goes into the database. Then we get our response. Now what I want to do is add that information to the chat log, right? We have that, but I want to add that information. Whatever we just sent, I want to add that. Let's close this chat. And I want to add it to here. So I'm going to put that, notice that it's going to big issue here. I want to add that information here, and then any other information is going to get added here. Notice Fred said thank you, and that got added as well. So basically what we have here is all the logs. So if it's sent from Lisa, I want to add it in here. And if it's sent from Fred, the admin, I want to load it from that. I'm going to show you how to do that in just a moment. So the first thing, A and B and C and D, all going to get the information through these lines of code. It's relatively straightforward. A, B through C, all going to get them through. And then of course the chat message, this again, chat message, I want the chat message with the commas directly from the form here. That's it. That's all we have to do as far as sheet 2 adding information to our log. Chat form, I want to clear the chat form value. I want to reload the chat. I'm going to run a macro to reload it. And what that's going to do is automatically add whatever Fred put in or whatever here anybody put in. I'm going to put it in here. So that's all we have to do there. And I'll go over that macro with you, of course. And then we're going to check for new messages. So this is going to loop and check for new messages. It'll keep going on. Okay, continue on. We're going to have this chat, wait and check again. These macros are going to run automatically. They've been commented out because I don't want to run them while I'm training. But when you uncomment it out, it's going to allow you to automatically check for messages as long as that form is open. So again, chat hide, this, remember that macro? That's the macro that was assigned to this form right here. When we go into the code, view the code here, and we see on that button here called close button, we have chat hide, and that's just the macro that's here. So all we do with that macro is simply hide the form, and then of course on our application on time, then check for message equals false. So I want to turn off any macros, but it's been commented out because we don't need that right now. But what this is going to do is if there's currently messages being checked and checked and checked, we need to turn it off, right? We need to turn that off. We can do that with application on time interval chat check for messages false. So that's going to turn it off. Basically, we want to turn messages on and keep checking for them to see if any have come in at some kind of interval. I've got it set up here for, let's say 100, actually 10 seconds would be every 10 seconds would be this, okay? So if we want to check for that, interval equals every 10 seconds. Now we can check for messages every 10 seconds. When we comment those out, take the comments out, it's going to check every 10 seconds. We're not going to do that during training. So the next step, now we know how to send messages, but how do we actually check for messages, right? What I want to do in this case is I want to run this and see if there's any new messages, and if there's new messages, I want to bring them into this chat log, and I also want to bring them into this live chat form right here. So how do we do that? Well, that's just with a little bit of a macro here. First thing what we want to do is dim response as string array. We're going to use an array, and I need to use an array because there's going to be a lot of information that's coming in. It could be several different chats, so we need to separate that out. I also need the user ID into A5. I need the username in A9, right? All that information is stored here. Got to have that information. So what else do I need? I need the UTC again. We're going to do the same thing. I need to get, and I need to determine the last check. So what I want to do is I want to check that database, and let's take a look at that database here so we understand what it is and we're going for. I want to look in the database, and I want to look for only, remember these are times. How do we know that these are times? It's kind of confusing, right? If we look, but if I look at this, if you look at this, it makes more sense. This is our last check. So if we change this to number, we see that this is 44189.57. So basically what I want to do is I want to look inside our database here, and I want to know for any send-ons that are greater than that number, 44189. So all we're going to be doing is really comparing number to number. And if there's something larger than that, then I want to include it. Then I want to include it and get it from this database. I want to pull it from the database. But anything older than that, I don't want, right? I only want new messages. So that's basically what we're going to do there. So that's why we need to get that information. That's why I need to understand that last check. So that's really important. So now that we understand that, we can continue on inside the code. So let's go ahead and take a look. So we've got the last check. We're going to put that into a variable. Now keep in mind that that last check is a double variable. It means with a decimal. That's important. So continuing on with the last check. Now again, we're going to run our object HTTP just like we did before. We're going to run a brand new hook. This time what I want to do is I want to extract the data. So we're using a little bit different hook. So where did we get this hook from? This link right here. That's again on this one. This time we're called something called user check and receive. And so I've created a brand new webhook here. And in this webhook, again, we've got a brand new, again, here's the webhook that I'm using. This time what I want to do is I want to send some information here. And what do I want to send? I want to send basically here, I want to send the user ID, the last checked, and the username. I want to send 3 different variables because what I want to do is I want to know only those information, right? There's going to be lots and lots of chats, right? Lots and lots. Here, there could be many, many users. So what do I really want? I only want chats that concern this user ID. And I only want to pull, right? I already have the chats sent from Lisa to Fred. I've already got those. But what I really want is anything that goes from Fred to Lisa for this user ID, only for that user ID. Fred could be chatting with 100 people, right? But we don't want everything in this database. We only want the chats that concern Lisa with this ID. So that's all I want. So in order to do that, I need to extract only those items from the database. So I need to run a filter on this database. So how do we do that? Well, we do that with this. So the first thing what we want to do is we want to do something called search records. What do I mean by search records? If I click on here, and you see if we want to add something, we're going to look for something called search records. So I'm going to click on here, and that's going to add a brand new thing just like we did here. And then what I want to do is when we click here, let's just say we were adding this, which we're not, or we can't do that. All right, let's just remove that. Well, the reason it has to be connected to something else, has to be connected to this. So that's important. If we were going to click here, we would let us know. So let's go ahead and click here. And so we have something called search records. We've selected our database. Here's a filter. Now I want to add some filters. Remember that. I want to say a sent on, right? We want to send it. Remember, I don't want all the records. I only want sent on greater than. Notice we have a lot of options here. I want to send on a numerical, based on numerical greater than. What do I want? The last check date, right? Nothing before the last check date, everything greater. So that's part of it. But I also want to know only those user ID. I want to run another filter. So you can add as many filters as you want, just clicking here, add, or, but in this case, I want add. So I've created another filter. This time it's based on the user. And this time we sent the user ID. Why do I know the user ID? Because, let's take a look back in here. Inside this webhook, I've sent 3 things to Integromat. I've sent the user ID. I've sent the last checked information. and I've sent the username. I've sent those 3 values to Integromat, and I've got them from here, the user ID, the username, and the last check. I've pulled all those, I've sent them directly inside Integromat here, and now I'm using them as filters. I'm using the last check because I want greater on that. I'm using the user ID, and I'm using the sent from. Okay, so we have all that. So I want only sent from. What I want to do is I want to extract all of that and only that data from that, right? So remember, we're focused on search records. Search records. That's what we're doing. We're searching for all records that meet all of those qualifications. It's just like a filter in Excel. Any records that meet those, then I want to take that information, I want to put it into an array. This is called an array aggregator. How do we add that? Well, it's on here under Tools and called Array Aggregator. Basically, what I want to do is I want to take all those records and I want to aggregate them. And basically, it's going to say, well, I want to data store 13 records from my data store, and I only want to get the records. I don't want anything else. I don't want the key. I only want the records. And I want to take that information and I want to put it inside a webhook response. So we're going to get all that information. What does it look like? It looks like we see here, we've got data here. This is our input, right? So this is all the input. And what about our output? Our output is here. So we have our output here. Okay, so we have our records and all that information here. Fred, Lisa here. Then we're going to bring it inside the webhook. Then what I want to do is I want a response. So I'm going to take that array, that is the output of this, the output. What's it putting out? It's going to put it into our webhooks. This is called a webhook response. This response is going to bring it inside our Excel. This response we can pull directly inside VBA, and this is going to come in something called here, response. This gets all that response and do that. So what does that look like if I run this here and I take a look at that? There might not be any information here. Let's go ahead and take a look at it, see if it's available. And then what we'll see in the response is we have nothing there because there's no records that meet that criteria, which is fine. But if Fred sends another message, we are going to have another record. So let's do that right now. So let's see what that looks like. Let's send a message from Fred. Let's say Fred has a nice response for her, and he says, say, how can I help you? And then we click send. Now we've got something to receive. So now if I run that message, let's take a look inside our database so we know what we have. Refresh that database. Let's go ahead and here, I'll just Control R and refresh that. And now we see, how can I help you? The last record is sent by Fred, sent from Fred, sent to Lisa. It's unread. We've got date and time. And notice this date and time is going to be greater than our last sent date and time in here. So it's going to be greater than that. So now what we can do is we can get that information here. So now when I run the macro, and let's go ahead and stop that right here, and then we're going to run this macro checking for messages. Now it's going to have meet those results, so we're going to be able to get that information here. So it's running and the results are here. So if we take a look at this, it'll stop and we get, now here's our response. Let's take a look. The response equals data, status, unread message, how can I help you, and the rest of that. So now we have a response. It's that single response. And now what I want to do is I want to bring that information in. But if we take a look, this response is in kind of some strange look. What does that look like? Let's take a look inside. What does that response look like? I want to show you that response. I'm going to put it right in here in contacts. I'm going to put it in F12 because I want to show you what it looks like. So let's take a look at that. Contacts, of course, I'm going to actually stop it here and I'm going to rerun it. Contacts, of course, is sheet 1. So let's put that here just so we can see what it looks like. I want you to show you what the entire response looks like because we're going to need to parse it, so you should know what it looks like. So we're going to put in the contacts sheet, which is sheet 1. Sheet 1 dot range, and then I'm going to put that response just temporarily inside here, F12. So let's take a look at what that might look like. F12 dot value equals response. So now I'm going to run it one more time. We're going to also stop it just so we can see what that might look like. Now let's take a look at this. And let's go ahead and wrap the text around. All right, so I've got a lot of information here that I don't need. So basically what I want to do is I want to put the status unread, the message, how can I help you, sent on, here is the time and data was sent on, sent to Lisa, the user ID, sent from Fred. Okay, so I have all the information, but it's kind of a mess right now, and I really need to clean it up because I really want to extract just that information that I want. I want to take it and I want to put it inside this information. So how can we do that? Now that you have an eye on what we're looking at, what we need to do is really parse that text, and we need to run it through because there could be multiple lines. So how do we do that? Well, let's take a look inside. Now that we have, let's continue on with our macro. And I'm just going to run that again. And now when we look into the chat log, we see that this has now been parsed through our code and we're able to parse it. So how did we do that? Well, the first thing what I want to do is I want to remove a lot of the characters that we don't need. So we're going to use replace to do just that. So how do we do that? Inside this, we're going to use a replace. Now what I want to do is I want to replace anything that says this starts out with data. So if this exists, and sometimes it does when we have multiple records, right? Let's take a look in the context here. I want to remove this first part, data, because I don't need any of that. So the best way to do that, now keep in mind that especially when you're using the quotation marks, I can't use those inside the code. So unless they're for ending and beginning string text. But in this case, it's part of the string. So how do I use it? Well, I'm going to replace it with character 34, and that's just going to do it. So you'll see anytime we use character 34, it's really that specific quotation marks here. So what we're going to do is say I'm replacing, and I'm going to look for this and the quotation marks and the word data and a quotation again and the bracket here and the colon, the bracket. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace it with nothing. So that's going to remove that data along with the brackets. Next up, I also want to remove a bunch of other symbols. I want to remove these brackets. I want to remove the parentheses and anything else that might, any of those characters that might be there other than the comma. The comma we're keeping. The comma is very important because the comma is our delimiter, and that's why we can't use it inside the text when we send it to the database. So our comma is very important because that's what's going to be separating us. So we're going to also remove these characters too. So I'm going to remove all these characters and I'm going to replace them with nothing. So I want to take all of those characters out. So for example, I'm going to be taking this bracket out, this left bracket out and replacing it with nothing. This right bracket out and replacing it with nothing. This left bracket type here and replacing it with nothing. And just going to continue on and remove unnecessary characters and throughout that. So now we have a relatively clean. And I want to do one more. I want to remove any other quotation marks. I want to remove all the quotation marks and replace them with nothing. Basically all I want is the text and the commas, really the text and the commas. So we've removed everything else and we're left with just the text and the commas. So now that we have the text and the commas, now I'm ready to parse that statement. So now what we're going to do is we're going to split everything else. We're going to use this array and we're going to split all the responses based on the comma. What that's going to do is separate all the records based on just the comma. So we can spread it into different parts. Now what I want to do is, remember, we could have multiple rows. We could have 10 rows of chat. So what I want to do is I want to determine the first log row. Where are we going to put that? The first available log row. In this case, it's 11. So that way we're going to take the log row and put it on the first available log row. This could increase as we add more chats. So we also want the item count. I want to set the item count. That's going to be helpful. So we know when we get to 7, if I'm running through these and I get to 7, I need to go to the next row and the next row because it's all in one string. So as we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and we go down to the next row, again 7. So each time we get to 7, we must go down to the next row. So we're going to keep track of it. It's going to start out at 1. So again, for the item number, but I don't know how many characters. It could be 15, 27. So what we want to do is we want to determine how many there are. So we're going to say for the item number, this item number, L bound, the lower bound of this array, it's going to start out with 0, right? 0 generally, of this array to the upper bound of this array. So it's going to loop through, I want to loop through every single part of that array. It could be, 100, it could be a lot. We don't know. So that's why we're going to use this dynamic for next so that it's going to automatically do that. So then what I want to do is I want to determine that one of the things, the difficult things, the most challenges is we don't necessarily, this order is not always exactly in the right order. It could be different order. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for status. And then when I find it, I'm going to replace it with unread. I'm going to look for messages. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the message part and replace it with how can I help you. Remember, we've already moved all the other characters. All we're left with is the comma in the text. So that's just what we're going to do. If the in string, in other words, if that portion of the string that we're looping through, if the sent on does not equal 0, then I need to know, let's say that it's part of this. Then I know it's going to be here. Sent on is going to be actually the first A, right? Sent on is here, UTC time. That's the time we're going to be sent on. So that means if this string contains the word sent on, then I know it's going to be going in column A. And then all I need to do is just remove the word sent on, right? We don't need sent on. We just need to remove the sent on and the colon, and everything else left is the values. And we're going to do the same thing for each one. If the words user ID is found, then we know to put it in column B, but first certainly remove that. We're going to do that for every line: sent from, sent to, status, and message. So basically all that information is going to go in. And then we're going to count the item, count item. As we do that, we're going to loop through. We need to do this 7 times. Once the item count gets to 7, then what we're going to be doing is we're going to add this in. I want to add the row in. This may not be important for the users, but it is for the admin. No, it's kind of inconsistent here. So it's not necessarily really important. I was thinking doing that in the future, but it's just something. It is very important for this portion here. This one, it is important. Okay, so that one's important, but this one's not. So this one is for our users application. I could remove it. So this is not necessarily this part of here, but then what we want to do is increase the item count equals 1. Again, I want to go back to 1, and then I want to increase the log row. Once we do all 7, right? Once I get to all 7 here, I want to increase the row one more time if there's more values, if we're not at the end of our loop, and keep adding as many chat items as we need to. So that's going to do it. So we're going to just loop through that. Next item number. So the log row equals 1 means we move one row down, one row down, one row down, and continue. Loop 7 again, go down and down, and just continue on. In this case, we only had 1. So now we're ready to go. So now that we've completed that loop, we've added all the data, we've parsed all the data, and now we are ready to set the UTC date. So the UTC date is going to be now, and this time what I want to do is I want to take that last updated here in A7, the last check. I want to update this date, but I want to do it, remember, based on the UTC time, right? If we look in, right now it's currently 9 o'clock p.m. here. I'm still working, and we just did that. So let's take a look in this, and let's format that as a date here inside here, and actually date and time here, so we can take a look at that. And we'll go into the time and we'll format it so we can see it. 1:30, I could leave it here. So we see that it's 2:02 p.m. Notice that there's difference. That's 7 hours before me, because I'm 7 hours ahead here in Asia time. I'm 7 hours. So that's exactly what I want. I want to show that specific time period. So I want to show that because the next time I'm going to look for any chats that happen after that, right? Because we've already checked all of that. So we're setting the UTC date as now, and then what we're going to do is going to A13, just in case A13 is going to take on now minus. We're going to set that local time difference. I need to know it's 7 hours time difference. All right, so now we're going to load the chat. Next up, we're going to macro is going to be loading the chat. All right, we're almost done. Stick with me. We've got a few more to go. Chat load. So what I want to do is now I want to load the chat, right? I want it when I click on here, I want to load this chat up. I want to know all the chat here, right? So that's relatively easy. Let's take a look at how we do that. Okay, so that's all the way up, right up here. Here, chat load, just a little bit of a macro. So what we're going to do is we're going to focus on with the chat log. Notice this sheet has now been arranged. It's not sheet 1, it's chat log. That way, if you drag and drop it, the sheet name is going to remain. So with the chat log, which is this sheet right here, we want to do something. What do we want to do? Well, I don't want all the chats. It would be too much, but I want to get the last 10, right? I want to get the last 10 here, the last 10 here, just the last 10 chats, and that's all we're going to focus on for now. You can change that number. It's going to load the previous 10 messages. So the last log row is going to be A and X up. This is going to get us our last row. In this case, it's 10. If the last log row is less than 13, and then the first log row is 3, in other words, I want to get 10. If our last row is 10, then I just want to get everything that's available here. You can increase it from 10. I just included 10. So what now? And now what I want to do is, otherwise, the first log row is going to equal to last log row minus 10. This is going to get us 10 of them automatically. So next, I want to clear the chat text. Chat text is clear. This is a variable. I just want to make sure that's clear. And now what we're going to do is we're going to ready to run our loop. For the log row equals the first log row to the last log row. Now what I want to do is the chat text, which is a string variable, I want to make it the chat text is and whatever it's currently at. If it's the first one, this would be nothing, but we're going to keep adding and adding on to the text. So the first thing I want to do is the C and the value, right? What is in C? The first thing I want to add is the sent from. When I click on the context, the first thing I want to see is Lisa, then I want to show the time, then I want to show a colon, then I want to show the message. So that's the order. So the first thing is the username of whoever sent this. So that's the first thing that I want to send here. Once I have that, I want to add a space. Then I want to add the time, but I want to format that time. Remember, the format this time, if I remember, I told you these are in UTC times, but I don't want to see UTC times. What do I want to see? I want to see my local time. How do I know what that is? It's going to be this UTC plus whatever's here. Remember, if you're in a negative, if you're 5 hours before, this is going to be a negative, and that's fine too. Negative. So what we're going to do is simply add that to the UTC. So all I need to do is take this time here, add it to this number here, and I get the actual time. So that's how we do it here. So, and the format, right, you also want to format it. So I want to add them together. I want to add whatever's in A in the log row. I want to add it to whatever's in sheet 1, A13. That's in this case 7. So I want to add those together because they're times, and then I want to format it based on this. You can format it however you like. That's the format I want to give. So that covers the time. What else do I want? I want a colon, then I want a space, and then I want the message. The message is located in column F. And then I want a new line, and VBCRLF. That's going to give us a brand new line. So that's it. That's all we have to do, a brand new line. So that's going to give us the new. So we loop through that, and when we do that, it's going to keep looping through. It's going to let us build that automatically, that chat log there. Great. So I'm glad I got to show that to you. So that's it. So the next log, then all I want to do is take the chat form summary, the chat form, remember that's our form, chat summary, this is our field inside the form, the value equals the chat text. So every time we just want to load this, we just run this, it's going to load that chat inside. It's going to pull it from this chat log, and it's going to basically load it inside this. That's all we have to do. Okay, very, very cool. So let's say, well, let's review. We've chat show, we've gone over that, we've gone over this, the chat load, send messages, we've gone over that, we've gone over the, we've gone over the chat wait and check, but that's commented out. That's just going to allow us to repeat it. We've gone over the hide, and we've gone over check for messages. So we've gone over everything in this. I wanted to review a few things. Now remember, these are the ones are live chat macro. These are the same thing for user chat messages. So we have user, this is going to go inside the application for the user. This is going to go inside the admin. Now the admin is almost the same. Let's just go over a few things on the admin. We're done with this. This, of course, you can take this icon. Of course, you can create your own icon and put anything you want. Just make sure you have these fields in there. That's all you need. Just user ID. You already have this contact manager. All you need to do is add these. I don't think it's necessary for me to include this. I want to make sure you watch these trainings. Remember, all you need to add is user ID, last checked, chat username, admin, and UTC time difference. Take a screenshot. That's all you need to put in there. It's pretty self-explanatory. But what about inside our live chat application? What I want to do in this case is I want to basically have multiple chats, multiple users, and then select I want to be able to load the chats in here. This one's a little bit different. So how do we do that? Well, let's take a look inside this module here. And the first thing, the send is relatively the same. There's not much difference in the send. All we're going to do is we're going to check for empty fields. We're going to use the webhook, and we're just going to send it to the database. We're going to use the same thing. Everything's the same, right? And we're adding it to the log. So there's nothing different on the send other than just the field here. We're sending it. We're putting it inside the log here, right here. And of course, we're sending it inside our database. It's going to be sent directly inside our Integromat data. So that's the same thing. There's no difference in that other than just the format, other than the fact that we're sending it inside, let's pull that up, inside our chat log right here. Otherwise, it's other than the cells here are form-based, but that's it, form-based or cell-based. So there's two different ways to do it. So we know that the send is relatively the same. We're just checking for empty fields. We're sending it and we're filling out our log. Everything else is the same. Next up, what I want to do is I want to wait and check again. Again, this is going to let us wait and stuff, but I've just turned this off. I've commented out so it doesn't continue to loop out while we're training. And then I also want to stop checking. When we click this button, we finished it all, and that's going to finish all the chat. That's going to turn off any macros to continue to check, so we can start and stop checking for chats, which is kind of nice. I also want to chat refresh. Now, what does this mean? This is the kind of new one. So let's take a look at check and receive. This is the same, but this is the one I wanted to go over with you. What I want to do in this case is I want to take all of our logs here, and I want to run it through a specific. If I click on a specific user here, I want that user, I want to know that user's log. I want to show that specific user. We've got a lot of different logs, but so how do we do that? So I want to bring in those results for a specific user. And so how do we do that? Let's take a look at that. So what I want to do is chat refresh. So first thing on sheet 1, if I want to clear the contents, any chat deals. So clear all these, clear all the contents out here. So we're going to clear, in this case, I5, J22, I25 through J28. So we're going to clear this information out. So that's the first thing we want to do. Next up, what I want to do is the last log row, determine the last log if it's less than 3. What do I mean by last log row here? Here's our last log row here. I want to run through these, right? I want to pull all the chats up, and I want to get them all information in here. But what I really want to do is I want to know all the user. I want to know Lisa, Fred, if there's multiple chats, so you can see but only per user. One from Lisa, one from David, one from Barry. So they'll be here. So if I click on Lisa's, it's going to show here. I probably should have added more data. I'm kind of running out of time this week. That's why I'm moving fast. So my apologies, but it's been a long week. Christmas. Today's Christmas, so Merry Christmas. Okay, so what I want to do is run our advanced filter based on A2 through H. We're going to run an advanced filter starting here all the way through H. I'm using a blank. I need a blank because why? Our results are going to have a blank, so it's important. I'm going to run it through H. So, and our criteria range is going to be J2 through J3. J2, I want a specific user ID. Why is that specific user ID? Live chat, B4. Let's take a look at that. B4 is our selected user chat. So when we select here, we see B4, it's the selected user ID. I want to know that user ID. Why? Because Lisa is here. If I click Sally, we're going to check here, different one. So we want to check Lisa. I want to make sure that's the one that we selected. So it's Lisa that I'm looking for. So what we want to do is I want to copy that information to the range. M2 through P2, unique equals true. We're going to copy that information. I want all those results here, M through P. But what I want to do is, in this case, what I want to do is a little bit different. I want to show you a different way. This time, I'm going to take those UTC times here, and I'm going to use a formula, and I'm going to add our time difference, UTC time difference. What is that? That's a named range that I created right here. If we take a look in here, let's take a look right here. UTC time difference. This again is the time difference. So we can use a formula. Before we use VBA, now we're using a formula. And that's going to automatically add 7 to whatever we have. So we're going to take a formula down here. I'm going to copy it down all these times. It's going to add, here's the results of the UTC time. Here's the results with the UTC time added on, with those 7 hours added on. So we get the aggregate time. Then all I need to do is bring this information in. Let's take a look at that. So how do we do that? Now what we want to do is we've got our results. We've run our advanced filter. We've got our results for M2, P2. Now what we're going to do is we're going to check the last row based on column M, right? I want to know the last results row. In this case, it's 9. Getting the last results row in, once we have that, we can then work with it. All right, once we have the last row, we just want to make sure that it's not less than 3. If it is, we can exit the sub. Next up, what I want to do is I want to copy down, again, this formula. I want to take this formula here, and I want to copy it all the way down here. That's going to get us our accurate times. So how do we do that? N3 through N in the last results row equals N1. Formula to formula, it's going to copy down that formula. Now what I want to do is I want to sort it. This is the nice part. I want to sort it based on the date so that our oldest at the top and our newest is at the bottom. So how do we do that? Well, I can run a sort. So with sort field's clear. I'm going to add a key. It's going to be M3. It's going to be the first time. And then I want to sort them on based on that. M3 through P. I'm going to sort them based on the time here. And then I'm going to sort them ascending, right? I want that ascending. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get MP, apply that. That's going to apply the sort. That's going to sort them all by date and time. Now they're certainly sorted by the date because when I put them inside my little chat window here, I want them sorted by date. I want the oldest up at the top and I want the newest at the bottom. So we do that that's why we want to sort them. Next up, for the log row is going to equal 3 to the last. Now what we're going to do is we're going to run it. Now what I want to do is I want to run this log row from 3 to the last one and bringing it in here, the log row. So the chat text, again, is going to equal the chat and the O, right? O, we want to make sure the sent from, that's whoever the sent from, plus the format. And notice in this case, it's already has the current time zone, so we don't need to add any time zone on it. But we do want to give it a format, AM, PM. Then again, and the colon and a space. Then what I want to do is give it the different chat message, which is located in P. P is going to take on that chat message. Then a new line. So we're going to do that for every single line. That's it. That's all we have to do to add the chat text. Pretty simple there, relatively. And then so basically all we're going to do is loop through this. We're going to ignore these. We're just going to add all this information. It's going to come directly in here. All right, that's it. All right, we are out of time this week. Go ahead and download this application. There's a few other macros in here. I want you to look through them and understand them. There's some really great. This is pretty much the same. This particular macro, send and receive, is almost exactly like the other one, so we don't need to go over it. And then we have chat summary, refresh, but we are out of time this week. This has been incredible training. We got live chat manager. I've shown you how to create your own live chat and add that into any single application so you can communicate directly with your users. There's so much you can do with this. I'd love to see you build upon this. I've kind of covered a brief summary, but there's so much you can do. You can send users messages directly so that when they turn on the machine, they get messages. You can send them updates. There's a lot you can do with this technology. I want to see what you can do. I hope you appreciate these trainings. If you do, go ahead and pick up that $66 175 workbook zip file. That's going to help us out a lot. That keeps these trainings free. I really appreciate it, and we'll see you next week.